You are listening to Adoptees On, the podcast where adoptees discuss the adoption experience. This is Season 3, Episode 13, Holly NG, which stands for Nerdy Gal. I'm your host, Haley Radke. Today I talked with Holly, aka Nerdy Gal, about her reunion with her first mother and some of the instigating factors that led her out of the fog. Holly also tells us how a technique called dirty pouring has helped her process her feelings. We wrap up with some recommended resources, and links to all of the things we'll be talking about today are on the website adopteeson.com. The other thing you can find on the Adoptees On website is a sign up for the new monthly newsletter. I just sent out an email about losing my actual voice, and I shared some thoughts about what happens when adoptees stay silent. I love to be able to include you when I send my next note in January. The sign up link is in the show notes, and it's also found at adopteeson.com/newsletter. Before we get started, if you're a new listener, I just want to give you a definition of coming out of the fog in case you haven't heard that terminology before, because we reference it a few times in this episode. Coming out of the fog is the process of discovering that adoption had a deep and profound impact on our lives. Now, it's a little more complex and nuanced than that, and if you're interested in hearing more about the process, check back in the podcast feed just a few shows back for a Healing Series episode called Coming Out of the Fog. Okay, let's listen in. Well, I'm so pleased to welcome to the show, Holly. Welcome, Holly.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me, Haley. I'm so excited.
Awesome. Me too. So why don't you start out and just share your story with us?
So I was born in 1978 in December, and the story has it that I was placed in foster care until February. Nobody is sure why. I've asked questions, talked to extended family members of my first mother, and my adoptive parents have remembered almost everything up till that day and the day they got me, except for why I was in foster care for 3 months. So that's kind of something that I struggle with, but I'm hopeful I'll find the answer to that someday. I was born to, my first mother was 19, I believe, and my bio father, or I don't know if you call them first dad, first father, was, I was told 21 at the time. It's weird because I do have my footprints, like my family history. And then I have something that my mom, my adoptive mother, had written down as far as traits go for both mother's side and father's side. I also have a copy of my birth certificate that was whited out with my names and my first mother's name. When my parents told me that I was adopted, I was probably 7 or 8 actually. And just like others that I've heard, I already knew. There was a part of me growing up, or there was all of me growing up, that knew that I did not belong to my family. So I remember this was my first trigger, I believe, in life. When they told me that I was adopted, they handed me these documents that were whited out. And I remember them telling me that if you ever want to look for your biological family, you have to go through us. We are the ones that have to help you with this because it's a big process, very difficult, and we have to help you. So I remember standing there and thinking, I was starting to get like enraged. And I was thinking, why do they have to help me do this? Like, why can't I do this on my own? And I can't even, and it was right there in front of me. Like, my name was whited out. My first mother's name was whited out. And it was just like everything inside of me started to boil. And I looked at them and I looked down at the birth certificate, if that's what it is. And I held it up to the light and I could see right through it. You could see through the whiteout. It was so old. And so you could see my name right there, and you could see my birth mother's name, my first mother. And that was it. And then I remember handing them back the documents, and they were just standing there staring at me like dumbfounded, like, oh my gosh, we'd never even thought of doing that. And so I handed the paperwork back to them. And I remember going upstairs and going outside to play. And I had written her name down and kept that with me until I was 19 years old.
So they handed you those papers when they were telling you were adopted?
Yeah.
Wow. So you found out you were adopted, and your name at birth and your first mother's name all in one shot.
Yes.
Okay.
When somebody tells me I can't do something in life, that has always been my motivation to do something. And so that was presented to me throughout my life from them. And I always did it. I always did whatever they told me I couldn't do. So that was kind of like my motivation was telling me I can't do something. Yeah. Well, my first mother, she had named me Holly Ann because I was born December 23rd. And growing up, I was Holly Jean. And so I had asked my adoptive mother, did you guys name me this, or did you keep the name, or how did this all happen? Because I'm still unclear as to the circumstances and why I was, in foster care, like I said, for 3 months. And they said, yes, we named you that. And my first mother swears she named me that first, but they said they didn't name me after what she did. And it's just, it turned out to be kind of not a fight amongst family, but a little bit of a animosity, I guess I would say. So I was named Holly twice, and apparently, so I wrote down her name and always kept that on a piece of paper, next to my bed or wherever it was. Growing up, I would always call, so the phone books back in South Dakota were about an inch thick, right? So you could look up any city, any name. And that was the first thing I did was I went through the phone book and I found the last name of my birth mother. I found that there was another man there, and then there was her name, and that was it. So I would call when I was younger, who was my uncle now, and I have spoken to him just recently, actually, and I would call and hang up, or I would call and say like, oh, was George there? It's just to hear his voice, and then I would hang up. Well, one time I called and he answered the phone, and and I said like, whoa, is Dwayne there? Just trying to disguise my voice. And my first mother and I sound identical. I was going to hang up the phone and he goes, hey. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I had a friend there with me and they were like, oh, and he goes, great talking to you. And then I hung up, but I was like, oh my gosh, they're on to me. They know like I'm calling them. Oh my gosh, Well, at 18 years old, I left home and a bunch of my friends and I moved to Arizona. It was the night of being out and much too late and many drinks into it. I decided I was going to contact my first mother and introduce myself and say, hey, did you have a child earlier in life? So I did. I went into a quiet room, and I remember my friends at the time were like, Holly, just do it. Just do it. I was like, don't be nervous. What's the worst that can happen? So I called her immediately when she picked up the phone. I could hear myself, and she was like, hello. And I just said, hi, this is Holly. And she's like, I'm so happy that you contacted me, Holly. I've been waiting for this for a very long time. So that started our relationship. And as awkward as it was, we were great friends for many, many years. Yeah, we were like sisters, two peas in a pod in a lot of ways. In some ways, no, and I found out I had a half sister. She had her about 8 years after she had me, and she kept her. She always felt very bad, I could tell. And I always told her, it is not your fault. I never, ever, ever have blamed her for anything. She told me she ran away from home during her pregnancy because her mother, my grandmother, wanted her to have an abortion. Her father, my grandfather, said, no, if you want to keep the baby, then you stay and we will handle this. Okay. So she did end up hitchhiking to Oregon and told me they partied, they had lots of fun, all that good stuff. So I didn't make the connection until just a couple of years ago that it was actually relatives of mine that she went to stay with in order to get away from her mother.
So you said that you were really good friends, like sisters, for a period of time. And what does that relationship with her look like now?
2 years ago, and this is when I believe I was coming out of the fog. I still have, some questions about what that looks like, but I know that I went through something that was like the most major transformation or awareness of my life that I've ever gone through. And everything became so clear to me. It's like, I can describe it somewhat, but I was working a very, very stressful job. I had 2 best friends die who I worked with. One of them had cancer, and I watched him pass for 2 years. And when he was when he finally was able to go and be at peace, I became super angry at my adoptive parents. Reading up on adoption and the presenting problem and what, a major life incident can bring you to coming out of the fog. I didn't know it at the time, but I was slowly coming out of the fog. So it takes me a little while to do things, I guess, looking back in my life than it does other people. And I don't know why, but I was really angry. I wanted my adoptive parents, to read The Primal Wound. I started The Primal Wound. I could not finish it because it was so painful. Everything was spot on, and I was still in denial a bit, I think, and I didn't want to hurt my adoptive parents. That's always been my biggest concern, is hurting my adoptive parents. So I was going through that, and in one of the nights of my very deepest, darkest moments, I was so mad. I Googled the agency where I guess I was in foster care, and there was a little comment section, leave your name, leave your email, we'll get back to you, and here's a little comment, you can make. Well, the comment ended up being a novel, and I was like, I don't think they're going to get back to me, but it feels so much better to get it off my shoulders. And basically what I was telling them, or asking them, I guess, at the end was, what do you do, or what kind of resources are you giving adoptive parents before they adopt a child? Because I would love to know what sort of counseling, what do you make them go through? What kind of questions do you ask them? Do you prepare them? Do you really sit down and prepare them for what they are going to deal with, with their kids? So they got back to me the next day, and they sent me this beautiful email, and they were like, some of the things that you said in your comment section to us, Holly, was they were spot on, and there's something in nobody would ever know. I was describing a yellow room that I was in, and all I could hear was screaming. And there was another thing. I had a caseworker. Her name was Ruby, and I described her. They were like, "There's no way that anybody could have known. You could not have known this." And I remember starting to remember things that I know that were way back in the subconscious mind, I guess is what you would say. And it was really strange. I mean, I went through I was a head case. We got laid off from the job. My 2 friends had passed. And then here I was thinking, you know what? There is something that you need to do, Holly. I don't know what it is yet, but you need to find your authentic self. It was just an internal voice speaking to me. And, I cut my friends out, and they were like, what's going on? And I'm like, I just need time. Or I'm going to lose it. I know that there's something that is calling me right now. Gradually over the last 2 years, I've found a lot of answers and everything makes sense now.
What does that mean that you found a lot of answers?
Well, I did a DNA test through Ancestry.com, and I found out from my first mother's daughter, my half sister, that I had always asked about my biological father. And she said, oh yeah, I know who he is. It might be one of 3. However, we're pretty sure, that it's this guy. So she said he was still alive. Well, over a couple of years of hearing that, my half sister was like, Holly, I have to tell you, your dad passed away in 2009, and I can't bear to watch the interaction between you and mom, go on like this anymore. So I do want to tell you that he passed away. And when I heard that, it was like a punch in my stomach. I couldn't believe that she had kept it from me. And so I Googled his obituary, and then I found through Facebook some of my siblings from his side. So there's one girl and one boy. The boy I look identical to. The girl, I mean, people say we look nothing alike. I could see it maybe. So I reached out. He was like very forthcoming. He was shocked. He didn't know that I existed. And it's weird because he was best friends with some of my guy friends in high school growing up. So I was thinking, if I would have stayed in South Dakota, I could have married my brother. But I didn't. He said that he would do a DNA test, and I waited the 9 weeks or whatever it was to get it back from Ancestry. And he said that he was doing the same because I wanted to make sure that this was, in fact, my biological father. When I got my test back, he said, well, let me see your test. Let's share results. And I said, well, did you get yours back? And he just said, no, I thought I could use yours. I said, okay, so do you plan on doing a test, taking a test, putting it in spitting in the jar and then submitting it or not? And he never did. That was kind of a letdown. So I kind of pieced together my family tree, and that took a while, and then I got sick of it. But there was one connection, I think, that I made. There was one first cousin, I don't know whose side it was on, that reached out to me and said, I don't know how you got my information, but I don't want anything to do with you. And I responded back and I said, well, you submitted a DNA test through Ancestry and we came up as a match. You're like the closest match to me. So didn't mean to disrupt your life. Have a good one. That's it. Haven't gone back to readdress that. I think I kind of stopped with that because it just seemed like there were so many, close ends, but dead ends, sort of, I guess, if that makes sense. And I was just kind of sick of all of it, or it was just too much. And so I kind of moved on from that.
Have you confirmed that, that's your brother and you know who your dad was and he's passed away?
It has not been confirmed via DNA. Mm-hmm. So no, okay. It's not 100%. Yeah.
And so I had asked you before, what your relationship was like now with your birth mother. And so can you take us back to that conversation where your half sister says, oh, by the way, your dad is actually dead. And can you take us back there?
Well, I confronted my mom and they just said, did you know that he passed away? And yeah, I didn't want to hurt your feelings. And so we kind of moved on from that.
I didn't want to hurt your feelings?
Yeah, I didn't want to hurt your feelings. I didn't want to hurt you. That's the common theme, it seems.
Oh my gosh. But what about the truth?
The truth is, it has been, unless these two families were so close, which I highly doubt that they were. It was a closed adoption. The truth for both sides, or both sets of first moms, first dads, adoptive parents, the truth is so far away from reality for any of these people, that it's just, to me, I was always brought up, tell the truth, tell the truth. And I've always been so forward and like almost to a fault. I'm honest. My first mother, we just kind of left it as is. She came out to Arizona about 5 times to visit over the past 20 years. Every single time she was here, it was like I was taking care of a child. At the first couple times I was like, wow, that's different. But the last couple times it was truly amazing to me at how maybe stuck in whatever depths of despair she's been in her entire life. But also that, like, we need to remember, like, life does move on, not from, it's never going to change, you know? So you have to, at some point, accept responsibility and, you know, make the best of everything. And the last time that we have spoken was 2 years ago, during Christmas. It was my birthday. I had gotten both sides of the family together to do pictures, which I thought would be a fun thing to kind of bring the family together. Needless to say, the day did not turn out the best. And I, you know, once again, I felt horrible. That night, my first mother, my son, and I came back to my place, and we're sitting there, and something had triggered her. I don't know what it was, but we were all watching a movie, and she told me, get up and get me a glass of water now. And so I was like, this is strange. So I got her a glass of water and set it down. And then she said, that's not the glass of water I wanted. I want a bottle of water. Go get me one. And I just said, we didn't get me bottled water, Mom. We got a jug of water. Okay. So she flies out of the chair, goes into my son's room where she was staying, and she slams the door, starts throwing around all the gifts that we'd given her. Glass is shattering all over the room. I take my son, I put him in my room, I lock the door, I say, stay in here, son. He is scared to death. And I come back out and I'm like, what are you doing? And she is just in a rage. She grabs her stuff, she packs her suitcase, and she walks out the door. And she never has called. She has never tried to reach out, except for on Instagram. One day, not too long ago, where she was making comments on photos that I had and stuff like that. And other than that, nothing. So it was like seeing her walk out the door. I had my son to take care of and make sure he was okay. So I didn't really think of it at the time, but that was pure devastation. I mean, it's affected me like no other. But I think when that happened, it triggered me to just, everything else happened after that. It was, I lost my job. We got laid off. I'd been working corporate America for 20 years, just working to the grind, and then that day, everything just unraveled over the course of up until now. It was in between there. It was about 1.5 years ago now, that I found myself in Walmart, and I picked up a canvas. I don't even know what I was doing there. It was like midnight. I'm like walking up and down the aisles aimlessly, just like, like I want to say, like, my beard wasn't trimmed, my hair was awry, and I'm just walking up and down at night. I just see a canvas. I look at a paintbrush, get a couple paints, and I'm like, all right, I don't know what we have here, but we're going to go with it. Okay. I get home and I'm just kind of just squirted paint on that canvas, and I'm just going back and forth, and it just fell into what it is now. And I think it was the escape from reality. And I was able to do something where I would do it by myself. I would do it alone. And so when I did it, I would turn on music, and I got more comfortable with the idea that I was the one in charge. I was the one that was in charge of making something. I was in charge of the outcome. It was all me. It was up to me. for this piece to turn out. And it was scary at first. After a while, it just became so exhilarating. I can't even tell you. It was like freeing to me. That's when I started to look into the dirty pouring, and I literally found, I mixed different things together, and I just came up with my own way. But it was the whole process that basically it allowed me to heal through being creative. I'd played piano my entire life. I was a concert pianist starting from 5. I took lessons from my godmother, who was very strict. She made me learn to write music and the theory behind it. And I was in Guild. It was like a national honors kind of society, I guess, for young pianists. Not when I moved out of the home at 18, I traveled 2,000 miles down to Arizona, and I've lived in Arizona ever since. And I didn't have a piano. I've had keyboards, but I didn't have my piano to sit down and just really jam out. And you literally lose yourself in the moment. And you don't have to be creative. Trust me, you don't have to be an artist. When I started the painting, I can't even draw a stick figure. I'm not even joking. Like, I've never taken an art class. You just have to go with it. You can't, like, what I tell people is that you have to do it. You have to do it alone. You have to do it scared. You just have to do it. You can't overthink it. Don't even think at all while you're doing it, because your subconscious mind will be doing enough of that for you. Your other side takes over with everyday life, with our jobs, our kids, our, things we have to get done. The creative is pushed aside and it's screaming to get out.
Okay, so you said dirty pour, and what is that?
Dirty pour, I did not come up with that name, but dirty pour is where you take acrylic paint and you add different mediums to it. Mediums are like Floetrol, which is like kind of like a paint, kind of thinner, or you add like different mediums that artists use. You can add water, you can add silicone, anything, and you mix it up, and then you dump them all together. And then you take your canvas and you dump it on top of the canvas. And as it spreads out, it makes these cells, these different cell looking things. And that's what I was trying to get to. Just the whole process of it, like mixing the paint and then dumping it together and then spreading it out on the canvas. It's so gratifying to me. I don't know what it is. It's so gratifying. I've posted some on my YouTube, but yeah, they call it dirty pour. And then I just call it my art therapy, because it really has, I didn't know at the time what it was doing for me, but it was freeing me. It was freeing me. I wasn't doing it for somebody else. I wasn't doing it to make anybody else happy. Which is what I know growing up, being pressured to do the piano and to be perfect all the time. That was for somebody else. It wasn't for me. And so this was the first time at, almost 38 years of age, 37 at the time. It was the first time that I was doing something for myself, like not getting a master's because of somebody else, not getting a job because of somebody else, or they wanted me to do it. This was me. This was all me. It is more freeing. I can't even describe it, because people kind of look at me and go, okay, that's fun.
Is there anything else that you've done in the last while? You've done your painting and you said it's been really healing for you. What other types of things have you been doing?
I started blogging, and the blogging was, I didn't know at the time. I think it was 20 years ago when I moved out here to Arizona with my best friends. We were sitting in a bar, and I remember like the music stopped and you could just overhear somebody talking about the other person. And I was always just like, man, do we have to talk about everybody all the time? Like, this is just not who I am. And then I thought, you know what, if I ever write a book, it's going to be called When the Music Stops, because that seems to be the story of my life. You know, when the music, and I didn't know the significance of it, when creativity comes to an end, I start to like panic because I'm like, how am I going to let out my frustrations? How am I going to let out my authentic self, you know? And so when the music stops, kind of a meaning for, you know, I'll always keep the creativity going. And it doesn't have to be piano or music. It can be anything. You know, it can be art. It can be underwater basket weaving. Who knows? Like that might be next for me, you know? So
In Arizona?
right.
Do you have a lot of
Sand
water?
weaving in the heat.
And how about other adoptees? Have you connected with other adoptees?
I have. And actually, through your show is really how I've connected immensely through social media. Twitter is a big one. I've gotten to see who have been some of the past guests on the show, and that has been so healing in itself, is just reaching out and hearing other people's stories that we actually are going through the same thing. I think that's the biggest thing. Like 2 years ago, I had no clue that anybody was actually feeling the same things as I was. It was mind boggling. Like I found your podcast. I was listening to Joe Rogan, right? And then I typed in something about adoption. I was like, maybe there's something on adoption. And yours came up and I started listening to it. And immediately I remember my son and I had just gotten home. I was in my room and I just dropped to my knees and I was just sobbing. Like there is a lifeline. There is, oh my gosh, there's like somebody that feels the same way. This is insane. How can this be? You know, like how come it took this long? That's been amazing, amazingly helpful. That's been my therapy.
Well, I'm so pleased that I can provide you with some therapy from afar through your earbuds. I know you've told me that story before, but I did not remember until you started saying, and I'm so glad that there's been a small piece from our show in your healing. I love that. So good.
And you don't give yourself enough credit. I'm telling you, girl, like it has been my everything. It hasn't even been just because through your show, I was able to find people on Twitter or Facebook, you know, those sorts of things. So yeah.
Well, adoptees are just really incredible people. And so we have like the whole gamut. You know, you're talking about your sister's the good adoptee and you're the angry one or whatever. But overall, we are incredibly resilient and have an immense amount of empathy for people in a variety of different situations. And even the ones that are maybe in a hard, angry place right now, are really incredible people. And
Absolutely.
so, yeah, so I've had almost all good interactions with adoptees. Almost all. So that's
crazy.
It's pretty good because, you know, we talk about this saying like hurt people. You know, occasionally there'll be that situation, especially online when there's, you know, you can't read tone or whatever. And there's been a couple of misunderstandings. But yeah, adoptees are pretty amazing. So I'm just honored and humbled to, at the same time, to be able to do this.
And my thing is like that I say for people that don't believe that, you know, we're going through this or that the suffering is in fact, like I describe it as when you're underwater and you are swimming towards the surface and like right before you get to the surface, you start to run out of air quicker and you get that really tight feeling in your chest. And it's right before you get to the surface. And then that feeling right there is like what it feels like, I think, when you're out of the fog as an adoptee on a daily basis, or however which way you go through it. If it's a couple days and then you take a couple days off, or if it's a week at a time, I think to me, that's the same feeling. And I can say that like the day that I was born, I was still free. The day they they removed me from my biological mother was really, to me, the last day of my life where I was a person that I was meant to be. And you can try and find that your entire life, but you only get so close. I don't think that you can actually ever get back to that place where you were meant to be. But the other thing that I do truly believe in is that, you know, we can choose to live in sunrise or in a dark place. And both are perfectly fine. You know, to other adoptees that are out there feeling this dark like place, that is fine. Because when people choose to live in that darkness to survive, I can remind those that say, always be on the positive, always think in the positive, that in those dark moments is when you have the most intellectual healing that takes place. In my mind, that's what has happened with me, is in those darkest of times, I have learned the most about myself. So never, ever give up. Don't ever give in. But those places of darkness are where you're learning the most from yourself.
I don't think I've ever thought about that before, but it's so true, because when you're in those like desperate thing, you're reaching for like what, like something.
When you've been there, when you've been to those places, it's almost like you have to make that your friend and go, like, some days I almost welcome it. It's really strange, because then when I'm in it, I'm like, oh, why would you welcome this, Holly? But then I'm like, okay, take a step back and know that you are learning the most when you are in the deepest depths of despair. You're learning the most about yourself, because those feelings and those experiences that have happened to you are coming to surface, and they're taking you with them. And now's your time to learn. And when you get back to the highs again, you know, like, wow, this is great. And this is what I took from that.
Thank you so much. Let's go to our recommended resources. And I would recommend everyone goes and checks out your pictures of your dirty poor. I don't know what to call it. Dirty poor artwork.
Dirty poor art therapy is what I call it.
Okay. It's so unique and interesting, and I love how you describe the process for us. And you can actually watch Holly, this is very cool, on Periscope. You do a lot of scopes where you show how you do it, and so that's been really cool to follow along with as well. It's kind of mesmerizing, right? Seeing the liquid go and move, and you're not exactly sure how it's going to turn out. And
exactly. There's no recipe. There's no recipe for creativity, you guys. Like, that's what I want everybody to know, is that don't even think about it. Just do it. And of course, you're going to make a mistake, but that's how we learn, right? So there's no recipe. When I give the classes on Meetup, and we were the first Dirty Poor Art Therapy meetup in the world and in the history of meetup. So they like featured us.
Oh,
so it was like, and everybody there went in with it with like the mindset of, okay, how much paint do I put in? How much, you know, the people that are like really wound tight, they were just dying. They were like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, okay, put aside, don't look at your neighbor, because yours is going to look nothing like your neighbor's, whatever. And I kind of told them, like, just go with the flow. This is literally a flow. Like, you flow, you're going to dump this. It's going to flow on the canvas. And they left there so happy. I was so happy just to see the looks on their faces. Like, they really took something in that they'd never experienced. Yeah. It made me cry, because I was so happy for them. So
it was so beautiful to see you plan that and how it all turned out, and everything's so neat. And so you're describing that, and I've only been to one paint night the last few years. This has been a huge trend, right? It's a paint night, and they have the canvas at the front, and it's like, this is the picture that you're going to paint. And the teacher of the class is like, okay, Neil, you know, everybody paint this color on top and then this. And it was amazingly tense, because legitimately didn't want to make a mistake because you're trying to get your painting to look like theirs. And your style is so different than that. It's so different.
I don't want to be like anybody else. I never have been. If somebody if I see somebody with like something that I've got from like Goodwill or whatever, I'm like, nope, can't wear it, can't do it, because I like to be different. And that way you're not pressured to follow a pattern. Like you literally can there was a man in the class, literally, he was probably like 75, and his wife at first was like, oh no, he's going to get paint everywhere. And I was like, let him go. And she was a psychiatrist too. And I said, let him go. And he was running around with paint all over, and he was laughing and she was laughing. And she said, I'm going to try this with my group. And she works with adults in a mental hospital. And she's like, I just don't know how it's going to work. I said, the same way it worked here. Just do it. You might want to use a little less paint, but just let them have fun. Let them be free. So that's just that's what it's about.
So good. Okay. What do you want to recommend to us?
I would recommend 2 things. There is a recipe for the dirty pour, and I don't know if you want me to say the recipe here or if you just want to have people go to my YouTube channel and watch it, because I made 2 videos tonight and it shows the process.
Cool. Well, why don't you give us the light version, and then you send me those links and I'll put them in the show notes.
I want everybody to actually try a dirty pour. Okay. So the recipe for the dirty pour is you go out and you buy acrylic paints. Doesn't matter what brand, doesn't matter how expensive, acrylic paints. A pouring medium. You can get Floetrol, usually from a Home Depot or Ace Hardware, something like that. Stir sticks, dollar store, like the popsicle kind, plastic cups, a canvas, gloves, and then just be yourself. You mix the acrylics with the pouring medium. You can put in silicone. You can do whatever you want. And then you pour it all together and you toss it. You do a flip cup thing on your canvas and then let it go and watch the cells appear.
Cool. Okay. And so you have a video of doing this on YouTube that we could watch for the instructions as well?
Yes. And I would be willing to do something online for anybody that wants to do it, who is uncomfortable with still doing it themselves. I would be more than happy to teach people how to do it.
That's awesome. Okay. Wait, did you say you had 2 things?
I did. And I had a book too. I have a book that it really helped me through some of the darkest times the last couple of years. And it's called Dark Nights of the Soul. And it's a guide to finding your way through life's ordeals. And it's by Thomas More. He talks about our lives are filled with emotional tunnels everywhere, whether it's losing a loved one, illnesses, disappointments, relationship woes, things like that. Like I was saying before, that in those dark nights, you can overcome those. And he kind of shows you how when you're in those fragile moments of your life, that restoration is coming. And you just have to be able to get through it. And he kind of helps you see in different ways how to get through those, even though they're pretty bad. Found that very, very, very helpful.
Great. Thank you so much, Holly. Tell us, where can we connect with you online?
You can connect with me at www.nerdygal.onuniverse.com.
Wonderful. And I'm going to put the link to that and your blog and also your meetup link, so that if people are in Arizona and they want to come out and do a paint night with you, they can do that. Go paint with Holly. And if you are far away, then you can watch her YouTube video about how to do this and send us pictures if you do it. Tag us on Instagram. Wouldn't you love to see that? That would be awesome.
For sure. Thank you so much, Haley. I can't even thank you enough. And you and the guests on the show are like the most dear people to me in the world. And I haven't even met you guys, but I seriously love you guys. So thank you.
You're so sweet. This episode is brought to you by my generous supporters. I literally couldn't do the show every week without their support. Thank you. If you're looking for a place to find further adoptee support, have you considered signing up to partner with me? I have a secret Facebook group for adoptees that is only available to my Patreon supporters. And I take monthly pledges to help sustain my work in producing episodes just like this one for you. Visit adopteeson.com/partner to find out all the details. We've got 2 weeks left of season 3. Next week, I've got our last artist interview to share with you. And then I'll have the season finale with 2 familiar voices coming up right after that. And my Patreon supporters have voted and overwhelmingly chosen the theme for season 4. And it's so good. I cannot wait to start recording and to share season 4 with you. Thank you for listening. Let's talk again next Friday.